this talk many times before, but this is the first time to a senior audience. And let me tell you, I feel your pain. Not only in my knees, but also I used to fall asleep during the sermon in the church every time. I don't know if I can put you to sleep today, but I never fell asleep during my own presentations. So that's a good point. Now, my talk today is made up of two parts. The first part, basically following my little book. Throw me a copy there. Okay, so actually I have a memoir, Violins and Violins, which mainly describes my life in Hungary and escape, but begins with the tour of the College Station High School A&M Consolidated Orchestra Tour of Hungary, so of local interest. The second part of my talk is really my life mission and redemption dealing with the Stradivari violin, for which I am better known than for anything else. Now, the story begins, I was born in 1934, so I am 84, and my first memories go back, of course, to World War II. I learned German because that was the language you had to learn. I remember all the speeches of Adolf Hitler in the radio. Later on, I heard the speeches of Stalin after the Russians came in. So my life was impacted in a great way by dealing with dictatorships and living under dictatorships. I consider myself chiefly an expert in brainwashing and propaganda. First, I experienced the Nazi propaganda, then the communist propaganda, and now I am experiencing the Austin citizen propaganda, which is very different from the Eagle propaganda, but all of them are essentially propaganda, many elements. Now, my life under communism was physically a difficult one. I am much smaller than I should be because of the starvation we went through. I love to think that I would be 6'2", but the fact is I am 5.8 or probably shrank to 5.7 by now. But much worse than the physical part of all the deprivation was the mental anguish we had to go through the communist dictatorship. It's not for the Nazis. The Nazis did not care as long as you played along. But the communists insisted that you had to feign enthusiasm for their methods and doctrines. And that was sort of terrible. I'll show you a couple of slides. I was, of course, the students had to go to the military every summer. The handsome guy in the middle, that's me, I don't know if you, the best looking guy right in the center. So every summer we were in the military, which basically was a good time. That was not a problem. Now, fortunately, Stalin died in 1954, and then things got a little bit better. Nikita Khrushchev took over. He became the new Russian dictator, and there was a slow liberalization process within the Communist Party of the Soviet Union that spread to Hungary eventually. In 1956, the Hungarian students decided that we are going to be the leaders in this liberalization process. We wrote up 14 points in which we demanded freedom of the press, the introduction of multi-party system, parliamentary system, and independence from the Soviet Union. Now that was basically outrageous, but we marched through the streets. We went to the statue of the Polish general who led the freedom fight 100 years ago in Hungary, and our numbers grew. From 10,000 students, there became 50,000. From here, the crowd went to the parliament, where it became 200,000. Now, I was not there because I had something better to do. I had a date with Martha during that time. So after our date, we went to the movie. After the date, we heard the sounds of gunshots. So what happened, while we amused ourselves, the students went to the radio station where they demanded to read the 14 points to the nation, but the army or the secret police was there. They started firing, and they killed, by accident, 2 officers of the Hungarian army. That made the Hungarian army very pissed, very mad. And in response, they opened up the barracks and passed out weapons to everyone who wanted to have one. So the street kids of Budapest, not so much the students, but also the students, got their submachine guns and started firing back. A regular war began. The government called in the resident Soviet army tanks. There were some 200 tanks going around, and the regular war began there. My dormitory was only 200 yards from the center of the action. Okay, so they removed the statue of Stalin. We drove around in tanks. I was one of them. And then this was the view from my dormitory. The tanks came in, and they received greetings by Molotov cocktails. These were the old T-34 model tanks, where the gasoline tanks were back in the open. So they were very vulnerable to Molotov cocktails. They started burning, and many times they just blew up. Now, our leader, who was a very educated, Western-educated professor, told us not to participate in any of these fightings. Make sure that no one does anything at the area of the campus, because we don't want the university to be destroyed. That would set us back many, many years. In spite of the best intentions, once we were on the street, it was very hard not to be involved and not to participate. So I did my fair share. I joined a team that specialized in firing at the Russian transport vehicles that had rubber tires, so we could make them stop there, and eventually they were burnt out. We never killed the Russian soldiers and actually led them away to safety. I did my part as a chemist in making Molotov cocktails, improved versions of Molotov cocktails with ether in them. It did not work out too well because it was too explosive. And I didn't do much. I only did once because I discovered this is a very dangerous occupation, to throw Molotov cocktails. So what happens when you throw a Molotov cocktail on a tank? That tank may burn up, but within 10 seconds, the second tank fired at your window, and that's what happens. So basically, you inflict a tremendous damage to the building and to the people who lived there. I could not take that. So I did only one brief stint on Molotov cocktails. For about 4 days, Budapest and Hungary felt free. It looked like the uprising was victorious. All the people were on the streets. There was a sense of euphoria. Unfortunately, what happened that the British and the French really shot us in the back. They attacked the Suez Canal. They thought that since the Russians are preoccupied in Hungary now, that would be a good time. Now, it didn't work out well. Anthony then had to resign and so on, but basically that provided the reason for Khrushchev to send the tanks back. On November 4th, they came back, and after that, there was really no chance, because at this time, there were 2,000, and the most modern Russian tanks then came in a line like this. You did not throw Molotov cocktails on those tanks. So they conquered Budapest, and that was the end. I stayed 2 more weeks in Hungary. For my participation, the secret police, the communist police, AVH, looked for me. They arrested me in a very adventurous way. With God's special grace, I managed to escape through the 2nd-story window, and this is described in great detail in my memoir. I'm not going to tell more about it. I took my way from Budapest to the border towards Vienna. I had no idea about the geography, had no map. I got lost in the swamps, but eventually I got over there, fortunately. And again, by strange coincidences, I ended up in Switzerland, which was my first choice, since I already knew quite a bit of German. So I went to, this shows the canal which we visited with Marian in 2006, on the 50th anniversary. And you see that those old watchtowers, wooden watchtowers, they are still there. The canal was wider at that time. I came through that canal on a float made of one of those logs on the watchtower. So I ended up in Switzerland. I had to repeat my exams. I did well, and I received the best subject in Zurich. In the chemistry department, there were 3 Nobel laureates of chemistry. It was one of the best chemistry departments in the world. So I had an incredible chance there. In Hungary, I would have become probably a routine chemist analyzing the city water. In Switzerland, I had the chance of doing the best topic they had, working on the structure of the South American poison curare, which was the most complicated of these natural products. By hard work and mainly good luck, we solved the structure because of the emergence of the new technique, NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance. Won the prize of the Swiss Society and had the invitation by Lord Alexander Todd to join him in Cambridge to continue research, this time on DNA, on nucleic acids. So in Cambridge, I met 2 American professors who have somehow passed on to me the text of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and I was so impressed that I decided to immigrate to the United States. From Switzerland, the most important thing for me, though, was my relationship to the violin has changed. Now, my biggest pain in Hungary was that really I wanted to be a concert violinist, but I had no violin. Our family violin disappeared in 1945, 44, 45. My mother hinted that probably one of the soldiers could have taken it. My brother eventually later learned that my mother sold it for food. So the bottom line was there was no violin. In Switzerland, I was adopted, sponsored by one of the richest families, and they had a violin on which Albert Einstein used to play whenever he was in Switzerland, which wasn't for many years. And I was allowed to take lessons on that violin. My teacher told me, Herr Joseph, in your age, no one ever learns the violin. At 23, once you are right on it, you can't learn the violin. In any case, he was right. I was a very serious student, as you can see it, but the sound was terrible. The sound is still terrible. I'm still practicing the same piece for the past 40 years. I put in more time into practice than Itzhak Perlman or Joshua Bell, and I'm still stuck in book 3 of Suzuki, but I never give up. I continue until the end. Okay, so I ended up first in Connecticut, then at Creighton University. I came to College Station, frankly, because the dean offered to double my salary, and I could not as good deal as Kevin Sumlin, but still not a bad deal for a professor. So I came here and did my work, got my tenure, but through strange coincidences, I lost my voice, and in 1984 I decided that I changed my life. No more biochemistry, from now on I would work on the Stradivari violin. That shocked the president and the administration greatly, because as a tenured professor, they didn't really want to fire me. Again, due to strange coincidences, Senator John Tower came down to give the commencement speech, who heard about my research from the Russian ambassador in Geneva. So the university then decided, well, let the guy work on Stradivari, it will be good for publicity, and that's the way it turned out. So let me tell you about the Stradivari violin. You are probably aware that there is something special about those old violins made 300 years ago. First of all, they cost anywhere between $10 and $20 million a piece now. But the reason why they cost so much, because for many generations, the best artists always wanted to play the Stradivari violins because of their remarkable sound, which is very hard to describe with words. The sound sensation cannot be described with words, but now we can sort of analyze it, and indeed those sounds are very different. So the million-dollar question was, what is so different in the Stradivari violins? The dealers and the poets and the authors who wrote the books, they say, yeah, it's a divine inspiration, it's the genius. You can't, define it. Now, I don't deny that divine inspiration, I'm a great believer actually in divine inspiration. But that's, for a scientist, this is not enough. You want to have some sort of explanation. After all, it's a serial product, It's not like a car, it's a more sophisticated, but still a serial product. There was something. So I was the originator of the chemical material paradigm that sort of claims that the Stradivari violins, the difference is that the wood, the materials, and the varnish were somewhat different from the present wooden varnishes. So the materials are important. If we claim this, we are very close to a culinary analogy. The various dishes, taste different depending who the chef is in making them. Here I show you the only Stradivari violin which is in mint condition because it was never played routinely. You can see it in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, in England. This violin has no price tag, you know. They wouldn't sell it for 50 million, basically. Antique values are very different. Now, the material differences. Nowadays, for the past 200 years, the spruce trees come down from the mountain by mechanical means to the sawmills where they are sliced up. Before the rivers were damped, on the other hand, they came down on 2 rivers and ended up in the Bay of Venice in salt water. Now, we know that this kind of process by itself does a great change. In 1974, when I began my literature search, I already concluded that the wood was most likely preserved after this treatment with boric acid, borax, which is an ancient preservative. The Egyptian mummies were already preserved with boric acid and borax. It kills insects and kills the fungi. So that was my prediction. I already started soaking my wood in this manner. Now, this theory is very easy to prove. All you have to do is to get chips from Stradivari, Violins, and Varnish analyze it. It's easily said when you approach Itzhak Perlman with a scalpel in your hand. It took me 20 years until I found Paul Olewski of Austin, whom I met in New York City during the Iran-Contra hearings running on the television, with whom I consumed large amounts of the best French wine, and then eventually led to sink my hypodermic syringe deep into his Stradivarius to get out the core samples that we needed for analysis. I don't want to go into the detail. This work was done here at Texas A&M by my friend Guillemet in the geology department. This is the first analysis and proof that indeed boric acid was in the wood of Stradivari and Guarneri, but not in the other violins. So that part was really proven. Another important point about the wood is that the Stradivari wood, the normal spruce has 10% water in it. Here, this mountain is the water in this spectrum. On the right side, that's the cellulose, the organic matter of the wood. So this is the normal spruce and the Stradivari spruce, different, but you see, this one relative to the other one are equal. In the previous one, this was 5 times bigger. So the Stradivari violin has not more than 3% water instead of 10%. That makes it much harder and much more vibrant and brilliant. So this really provides the explanation based on this knowledge which we published, which one of my oldest friends, Susie Proudfoot, his father was my best friend here in town. We worked on violins together. So this knowledge was published around 2000, and since then every violin maker in the world is using this method, and now the violins, the sound in various tests were shown to be comparable to the genuine Stradivari violin sound. We also did analysis of the Varnish. This is from a cello. This is a beautiful picture. It looks almost like a galaxy from the Hubble telescope. You see stars and so on. Stradivari put on 12 layers of varnish, and he had the three basic colors of red, blue, and yellow, which he did not mix but applied in separate layers that were separated by colorless layers. So that gave a very interesting, complex color sensation. There were crystals in the varnish that on the cross polars appear like light bulbs. It's very beautiful visual appearance. And that's one of the reasons people like the old violins, because the varnish looks so beautiful, exciting, hard to describe how. Here we have run the magnifications. We have shown that below the varnish you have a composite matter of a micro composite. Further magnification, the Stradivari varnish also had Nano Composite, which is, nano means that really very small. That's a buzzword in modern technology. Nano composites are in the vogue, and it's really amazing that 300 years ago those primitive craftsmen already knew how to make a nano composite material. So we applied all that technology to the new violins. There were many scientists working on it. I just mentioned their various contributions. You could give lectures about any of these lines. The physicists analyzed the sound. They did finite element analysis, modal analysis, the CT scans, and we are doing now phonetical analysis for vowels in violins. Here I just show how doctors do the scanning in the same NMR machine, magnetic resonance imaging, where you stick your broken leg in, you can stick in the Stradivari violins, and that shows what's inside. These three violins are among those which were in best conditions. I know one of them, nicknamed the Titian, that belongs to an artist in Houston, whom I met and recorded the violin. All of them have a big patch in the center. However, most of the Stradivari violins inside look like this. There are at least 30 pieces of new wood in this violin. So they have been re-engineered to a great extent. And if a new violin doesn't sound like a Stradivari violin, the main reason is that the new violins don't have these 30 patches inside like the Stradivari. So the Stradivari repaired is actually a modification by the restorers. They put in those patches because the Stradivari, after playing it for 300 years, generally lost its brilliance. It became like a viola, a darker sounding instrument. Once they put in those patches, it became again a brilliant violin sound. So here I summarize, and you can read off my interpretation of the Stradivari phenomenon. The acoustical excellence of the violin was not only due to Stradivari's excellent workmanship, but to some degree also due to the chemical preservatives which were provided to him by his neighbor, the drugstore chemist. Stradivari became very famous also because he made 10 times more violins than the other violin makers. So if you make 1,200 instruments, obviously you develop a great technique. And also, he invented a new business model. He only sold his violins to the very rich people. He did not sell his violins to the violinist who played it and destroyed it, like his friend Guarneri, who made the mistake of selling his violins to the actual players, and they played it to death. And there are only 100 Guarneris left. half of the Stradivari, 600 something, are still around. They went to the royal courts, to the dukes, to the bishops, few English bankers, and that's it. The virtuosos like Itzhak Perlman later on made enough money to buy it, but most violinists now don't have the money to buy a Stradivari. Okay, of course his workmanship was wonderful, and he worked his violin so beautifully that no one could criticize it. Normally, you can always criticize the violins of the maker. My violins are very easy to criticize because there are a lot of mistakes in it. He made perfect looks, perfect technique, perfect lines, perfect efforts in every regard. So that's a very important part of being successful. Now, you know, nowadays there are alternative facts, not only in politics, but actually also in many other areas. Not all Stradivaris are good. Not more than maybe 20% are concert worthy. The rest are good for chamber music, for private ownership and so on. They have antique value. The best contemporary makers who all, as I said, use my suggestion and soak their wood. They also bake in wood, by the way. I mean, the process involves baking, like cookies in the oven at a certain temperature. And that is called a torrefied wood. That gives this particular brilliant sound. So the new violins in blind test compare favorably. My new violins also compare favorably with the except these tests are never done with the best Stradivari. The comparisons reported in the world press are very unfair because they take the best new violins and they compare them with the so-so Stradivari violin. The violin played by Itzhak Perlman and Joshua Bell is by far better than any of the new violins. Also because of the fact that the violin has to be played well by a good player before the tone becomes maximized. You know, Suzuki students playing Stradivari violins would never sound very good. The Stradivari violin research is summarized on my violin website, Nagyvaryviolins.com, which has numerous articles, sound tests listed on it, and the story of Hungary and the uprising is, you can look up on my website, violenceandviolins.com. Books can be ordered there, and I mail them with the dedication if you are interested in any of them. So I think, yes, I made it in 40 minutes, and that's what I wanted. Thank you for the invite. It was a pleasure to be here. If you have any questions, I will be glad to answer.